Believe it or not, big-time SEC programs lose talented players too, and sometimes, Berm, they choose to go play for Ohio State instead. Welcome to Snap Judgments on 97.1 The Fan, 10 TV, and 10 TV Plus. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. And a trio of pickups. Ohio State's done a lot of work in the transfer portal, Berm, but three of them from SEC programs, Florida, Georgia, and LSU, all which can help the Buckeyes in various ways.
And some of them we've already been talking about the last couple of days, namely Jacobe Jackson, the running back from Florida, who we'd mentioned throughout the week, and saying on Tuesday that we thought that was going to be close to finished. That ended up happening mid-afternoon on Thursday. The addition of LSU wide receiver Kyle Parker on Friday morning was sort of the pièce de résistance, the coup de grace, the cherry on top. But to me, honestly, it's Dominic Kelly, the defensive back from Georgia, that is the biggest surprise add, but also a guy that I think maybe adds the most long-term potential / value for Ohio State. And a reminder of how the Buckeyes plan generally is in line with what occurs, because, there has been a ton of discussion since Aaron Scott entered the transfer portal about what you lose with him. But then what you end up adding with Dominic Kelly, who's a 6'1", 195-pound corner who played 8 games at Georgia as a freshman, I think you actually get a very similar skill set, but perhaps with a higher upside and more eligibility. So it's like, yay, win-win for Ohio State. So it turned out pretty well. And I think we should feel comfortable at this point on Friday afternoon to say that the Buckeyes should be done in the portal.
I suppose I could include a fourth SEC program, because Cameron Calhoun was at Alabama last year. A little bit of more of a well-traveled journeyman. That was his third stop in college football, but that still goes into the same bucket of we've talked about what the buzzwords were for Ohio State in the transfer portal with veteran experience and versatility. Not all of that came in one program for Cam Calhoun, but certainly another player that Ohio State had evaluated when he was in high school in Cincinnati. The familiarity there with both the coaching staff and with Jermaine Matthews, his former teammate. So that's another one that goes in that step in the right direction. But as you mentioned, when you look at the pickup of Dominic Kelly from Georgia, another 4-star, he doesn't fit in the veteran mold. And I think that's what you're alluding to there with the multiple years of eligibility. Some of what Ohio State was targeting here and the quote unquote plan, to add people who could play right away in year one. I'm not certain. Kelly did play for Georgia right away. That doesn't tend to happen by accident with Kirby Smart. You have to earn that opportunity just the same way you do when you suit up for the Buckeyes. He is a little bit different than the rest of the mold that we've been talking about for the last week and a half. So I think that's another reason why that's so intriguing, because it's a little bit outside of the norm of what we were anticipating.
Yeah, and the good news for Ohio State fans is if you are someone who reads the message boards around the country, if you see the way that the Georgia fan base reacted to losing Dominic Kelly, you can see that they were very disappointed about that. It's similar to the way Ohio State fans were about Aaron Scott. Like, you think that you got a guy who's ready to emerge and be a major player for your program. And for Kelly at Georgia, it would have been year 2. I think ultimately the experience piece, like number of snaps and that kind of stuff, is less relevant than where he did his onboarding in college and the opportunity to get a sense of what it takes to survive at a place like Georgia, but not just survive, but to excel. Because as you mentioned, Kirby Smart's not playing true freshmen that easily or that often if they're not ready to go. So he was a guy that they were counting on to be either a rotational third cornerback for them this year. And a lot of people that I've talked to who cover Georgia thought that he might be their best overall man coverage cornerback. So it's a different type of ad, but he's going to have to come in and play for Ohio State. And ultimately, again, when you look at the departures of Bryce West and then Aaron Scott, I think you can see reasonable facsimile / replacements when it comes to Cam Calhoun and Dominic Kelly. I think the Dominic Kelly one is most potentially valuable for Ohio State, because I still believe what we've talked about for the last few weeks, that the best arrangement for this secondary might be with Jermaine Matthews in the slot. And so now with Dominic Kelly and the length that he provides, you do have a rotational piece that you lost when Aaron Scott departed. So, you're going to have to play him. He shouldn't have to come in and be a every down starting cornerback for Ohio State, because that's why you have Jermaine Matthews and Devin Sanchez. But again, multiple years, major upside, and SEC experience at not just like one of the SEC schools, but Georgia is a good way to build a roster.
LSU usually goes right in that same conversation with Georgia. It's been a couple down years, but in a struggling Tigers offense, you look at Kyle Parker, he was one of the bright spots. And I think you could look at the stat line and see, 30 catches and I think 4 touchdowns and just a little over 300 yards. Well, that's relatively modest. And that would be a fair assessment. But Cortez Hankton has gone to bat, with Parker multiple times in his recruitment, first to LSU and now to Ohio State. There were dramatic limitations for what LSU could do through the air. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I think if you just looked at this statistically, you might say, well, how does that represent a chance to upgrade over the losses of Quincy Porter or Mylan Graham or Bryson Rogers? Certainly doesn't immediately scream out that he's going to have a Carnell Tate-like impact on Ohio State. But I think in the more conversation I've had about it, the more like real potential there is for Kyle Parker to go right into at least the top 4, if not the top 3.
Yeah, I mean, he's also not going to be counted on to need to be like a traditional wide receiver 2 at Ohio State. He's a depth piece. He's a player that is quicker than fast. He's more of a shifty slot guy. He's not the bigger outside wide receivers that Ohio State has on the roster with Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry Jr. Like, he is meant to be a different type of piece and a guy that Ohio State can mix in with Brandon Inniss and mix in now with Devin McQuinn or McEwen. Again, I apologize. I'm not entirely sure how we're supposed to say that last name. We'll figure that out when we get to meet him. But Devin McEwen and Kyle Parker are kind of similar body types, styles of offense. So it feels more like, obviously you have the aliens outside with Jeremiah and Chris Henry, but then the Parker, Brandon Inniss, McEwen are more of those KJ Hill, Johnny Dixon type wide receivers that you're going to be able to just move around and get a lot of versatility out of. He doesn't need to catch 30 balls next year at Ohio State. You know what I mean? He needs to be able to catch 20-ish and be a guy, excellent route runner. Is he going to come in and be physical as a blocker? Like, these are the things Ohio State needs out of that spot. He's not being counted on or asked to be wide receiver 1 or 2 or probably even 3 at Ohio State, but I think he'll be in the conversation for wide receiver 3 when things really start to get unfolding in heading toward the season. But obviously the Buckeyes are going to do everything they can to speed up Chris Henry's development this spring. So it's a veteran piece, a good piece, and that's what you have to have. You have to have support. You have to have coaching, and now they've got it.
Support, coaching, speeding up. That sounds like you're not describing football. That's Awaken 180, Birm.
It's Awaken180weightloss.com. That's what I've been doing. Great coaching from Mandy, great support, great resources on the app. It teaches me the things I need to eat and how to eat and when to eat and to how to make sure I'm handling and managing my own personal health better. And I certainly have done that. I've lost almost 30 pounds in just about 4 weeks. That's a lot of weight very quickly, but I feel good. I don't feel like sick or emaciated or tired. Like I've on all the same energy. I feel a lot better and I think I look a lot better. So I appreciate Awaken180weightloss.com for giving me the opportunity to be a part of their plan, but also I thank them for having a plan that actually works. So thanks to Awaken180weightloss.com. You can also find that plan. You should go there right now. Tell them that we sent you. When you look at the roster from here, Austin, obviously we're going to talk about Dominic Kelly and we're going to talk about Kyle Parker. I don't know that Jacobe Jackson, the Florida running back, is going to be discussed quite as often because I think the majority of people will still believe that the Buckeyes will rotate primarily between Bo Jackson and Isaiah West. But I feel like when you bring in a 7th-year guy, like you're getting something different in the room, right?
Yeah, I think that this is about a couple things. The first part of the film that jumps out when you watch Jacobe Jackson is the physicality, the toughness, the hard-nosed mentality in red zone situations. And I don't want to put any limit on what he can or can't do at Ohio State, but a lot of his success and a lot of the highlights that you'll see of him, the 7 touchdowns 2 years ago, 5 of those came against SEC opponents. If we're going to keep that the theme of this episode of Snap Judgments and SEC experience and success, 5 of those 7 touchdowns came in those games. He had 100 yards against a Texas defense that, went to the Cotton Bowl semifinal against Ohio State. That is one of the better games of his career. That's a little bit of an outlier statistically when you look through what he's produced. He was injured a year ago, didn't have a chance to build on that in 2025. But even if that's all he gave, and I think back to putting this in comparison and in terms of what CJ Donaldson was, what we thought he was going to do, CJ Donaldson, with his veteran maturity and know-how of how to, and taking advantage of the resources at Ohio State, took his game to another level. Did it make him an elite bell cow running back? It did not. But I think the initial intent was, let's get somebody who can move the pile, get the pads down, and score touchdowns in the red zone or get a 3rd and 1. And I'm not saying that Bo Jackson or Isaiah West can or cannot do that, but it's a twofold situation. If you have someone who can specialize in that role, like it looks like Jacobe Jackson can, okay, that's a plus. And the second part is, if Carlos Lachlan is primarily building around Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, which he is, those are guys in their second year of college football. And they clearly handled their business well in year 1 to make the impact that they did as true freshmen, but you don't know everything at that point. And I think that Carlos Lachlan would look at that as someone else who can come into that room and hopefully set a good work ethic example, approach your business the right way, coming from another program that competes at a high level. And he's also I'm excited to get to know him and tell the story, because starting at a junior college, dealing with injuries, going to Florida, that's not the typical path that anybody takes to Ohio State. So I would assume that there's these intangible pieces that I'm mentioning here with Jacobe Jackson. They must be real. I've not met him, so I don't know, but that has to be part of the draw.
Well, there's certainly a draw, because Carlos Lachlan kind of identified him pretty early in this process when he entered the portal as a guy that he really liked, alongside Mekhi Frazier from Michigan State. And those are the only 2 running backs Ohio State hosted. So something about Jacobe Jackson was obviously enticing. It's fascinating. I mean, again, this is a guy who came out of high school in the same recruiting class as Cade Stover and Harry Miller and Garrett Wilson. So, it looks like, and I'm leaping to a conclusion here, that he made a similar decision back in September that CJ Hicks and Jalen McClain made, or not Jalen McClain, Malik Hartford made for Ohio State. He played in 4 games this year for Florida, but it was the first 4 and did not play after that. Of course, the Gators were firing their head coach and everything else at that time. So I guess I can understand the thought. But, a year prior, as you mentioned, he ran for 600 or 500 yards. He averaged 5.5 yards a carry, had 7 touchdowns. So it's a guy that was productive when he had the opportunity to play. So Carlos Lachlan definitely has a type. He wants a bruising, physical running back, a guy that's going to run through combat and run through contact. And I know that there are Ohio State fans that look at the CJ Donaldson year and be like, well, I'm underwhelmed by it. But he scored 10 touchdowns for Ohio State and did everything the Buckeyes needed as a leader of the running back room, in pass protection, et cetera. So I think if you can get a similar veteran presence, a similar leadership, similar perspective gain for guys like Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, then this is a really good pickup for Ohio State, because again, he's not someone you're bringing in expecting him to be running back number 1, maybe not even RB2. So what you're getting is depth and leadership and veteran savvy that you haven't had at the position, and you weren't going to have because you lost James Peoples.
Yeah, I will say I just want to point out, and I double checked while you were talking, because Jacobe Jackson had to apply for an additional year of eligibility and did so. So I think that the injury he suffered in September was legitimate. I don't think it was an opt-out situation or to protect the red shirt, because he had to apply to get that. So,
well, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So I
guess going into year 7, there's probably been multiple applications for additional eligibility.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. And again, all of that is confusing. We're trying to make as much sense of it as we possibly can every day on the Ohio State Beat and on the Austin Birm Show and on Snap Judgments. So thought we needed to get one in on Friday, given this flurry of activity. The window is closing on Friday. That doesn't mean that the Buckeyes can't continue to host players or bring them in moving forward, but we're nearing the end of this phase of roster management. And I, for one, am thankful for that. I'm also very appreciative of Jeremy Birmingham for giving me his thoughts on Snappy Jays. Appreciate you for watching as well. Hope you guys have a great weekend. For Birm, I'm Austin. So long.